Theatreland, London's West End. 1 square mile of musical talent worth over £250 million a year. One of the cultural epicentres of Great Britain and the world. But it wasn't always this way. 65 years ago, the West End was parochial, trapped in a time warp of pre-war nostalgia, completely unprepared for a new breed of musical emerging from America. This is the story of the rise of the British musical. How the British fought back against American domination to not only reclaim the West End, but to become a driving force behind musical theatre around the world, turning it into a global industry worth over £1.5 billion a year. It's a tale of titanic shows.
Half of it wasn't written, and the bits that had been written were far too long.
Nobody in our team had done it before, except for me.
This was a sort of a musical phenomena.
A story of prodigious talent.
All the talent that was being invented were all in Britain.
We just thought, this is working quite well.
And that was the day my life changed forever.
And phenomenal daring.
After the reviews, our box office was shredded. They got to see some ass.
They took him off screen and we never saw him again. That's how difficult that show is.
At the end of the 1980s, the West End was conquering the world with a new brand of big, bold and fabulously expensive musical. Andrew Lloyd Webber's hits had involved dancing cats, roller skating trains and a grand gothic horror romance. Some surprise then when he announced his next show would be based on an intimate story of romantic entanglements.
He makes no secret of the fact that he wrote Phantom because of Sarah. Well, that relationship broke down as Aspects was going on. And Aspects is a far more mature piece. It's edgier. It's where Andrew was.
He chooses his projects very intelligently. He wanted it to be something different. And I think he's excited by doing something which seems to be a contrast to whatever he has last done, which is one of the reasons he works with a lot of different directors and lyricists.
3 years earlier, Lloyd Webber had recognised the importance of celebrity in launching a new musical. He tried the same thing again with Aspects. But this time it wouldn't be with a star from British sitcom, it would be one of the world's most famous actors.
Because I'm free, nothing's worrying me. Oh, please!
But the transition to musical theatre wasn't an easy one.
This is a man who is a big, big movie star, being asked to do something that he's never done before. And I don't think he was supported. I think everyone was very concerned about their own problems, that nobody had the time to nurture Roger.
You have to tell me honestly, because I'm going to make a fool of myself. So he wasn't very honest. Here I am making a fool of myself.
And you could watch him gradually getting more and more ill at ease with the process.
Can you give us a quick tune?
Yeah, give us a song. Go on, give it. Just a hum even. Just a hum.
That's it. That's my range.
I don't think he was happy with the idea of all that singing. But actually, I saw a run-through with him, at least of one of the acts, and I thought he was very charming. But he didn't. I mean, he used to change the lyrics. There's an ensemble where they sing, I'm falling, I'm suddenly falling, and Roger was singing, I'm appalling, I'm fucking appalling.
I want to be the first man you remember.
Just 4 weeks before opening, Moore left the production. The spotlight now fell on his little-known co-star, 26-year-old Michael Ball.
Now I have top billing, and with great power comes great responsibility. It was great, in a sense, because I was suddenly the leading actor in a brand new Lloyd Webber show.
With top billing, Michael Ball became the first star to be launched by a musical since Elaine Paige 11 years earlier, helped by a #2 hit in the UK charts.
Love changes everything, hands and faces, earth and sky.
For me, it all came together with the song Love Changes Everything. Once we had that song, somehow or other, it wasn't that easy, but it was a foundation, it was a cornerstone.
Love Changes Everything was written for the show, but we also wanted it to have a life outside the show.
Less than 4% of the population go to the theatre.
Love changes everything.
What having a single does is open you up to the whole of the country.
Nothing in the world will ever be the same.
Michael's newfound fame came at a price. With Lloyd Webber's maturity as a writer came a more ambitious score.
It was vocally as demanding as anything that I've ever heard in the theatre.
It's one of the hardest vocal roles that Andrew's written. Because you start the show solo, in the spotlight, going, love changes everything. Usually you think the big song's going to be at the end of the show, the 11 o'clock number, as we call it in musicals. But no, Andrew writes at the beginning where you go, love will never ever let you be the same, right? But that wasn't a B flat. But every night you sing the first song and it's a B flat that you have to hit.
It's my fault. I put in the B flat. Initially it just ended on a repeat of the line. And I said, but it needs a big ending to Andrew. And he goes, well, where could it go? I said, well, you need to go right up at the end. And he goes, but that's a B flat. And I said, well, is it? I don't know, but I'm going to bloody try and sing it.
Love will never, never let you be the same.
I remember actually seeing someone, I'm not going to say who it was, but they didn't sing it. They didn't sing it. They kind of screeched it, and they left the production without telling anybody. They just didn't show up for work the next day because they just couldn't deal with it. That's how difficult that show is.
Aspects opened in April 1989 to sell-out audiences. Less than 1 year later, following in the wake of other Lloyd Webber shows, it transferred to Broadway.
Although the New York critics haven't yet cast their judgment on Aspects of Love, everyone at last night's premiere thought it had gone well.
It was the most amazing evening I think I've had. We had a wonderful reception when we opened in London. We made a few changes to the show for here, and it has just been splendid.
I was very proud of it tonight. I think it's a very different show for me, and in very many ways, it's the show that I'm most proud of.
It was a great success, the opening night performance, and then we were waiting for Frank Rich from the New York Times waiting for his review to come out. And I remember saying to Trevor Nunn at the party, I'll be thrilled if he only hates it, because he was known as the butcher of Broadway.
I have never read a review like it. Like he had gone through the programme and taken every department and rubbished down to the ice cream cellar. It was vile. It was vile. There was not one redeeming feature, he said, in the whole evening.
For the first time, Andrew Lloyd Webber misfired on Broadway. Aspects failed to find an audience and closed after just 11 months, losing its entire $8 million investment. With the New York Times gleefully labelling it the greatest musical flop in Broadway history, question marks were raised whether the British onslaught was faltering. After the extraordinary success of Les Miserables, Alain Boublil and CLAUDE-MICHEL SCHÖNBERG had been wrestling with their next project for the West End's other great impresario, Cameron Mackintosh. Wanting to update Puccini's Madame Butterfly, Schönberg had come across a Vietnam War photo of a girl being separated from her mother when she is evacuated to America and a new life with her GI father.
Then I was quite shocked because the picture is amazing. I still have the picture in my room. And I just rang Alain and said, but would you consider that the story of Butterfly happening during the Vietnam War, and he's an American soldier, she's a Vietnamese woman.
This picture was so striking, so amazing. Obviously, suddenly we realized that in a simple conversation we had decided to put the Vietnam War on the musical stage.
It smelt dangerous to me. I described it to somebody as sort of like doing the show would be like standing on a musical razor blade, because everything about the story was real. And yet people were buying a ticket to a musical, so there was no point doing the musical if it wasn't going to be entertaining. And therefore finding the style was going to be crucial.
Yeah, but I think that whole
but I cannot do it without the first part.
Oh, because you can do
Along with Lloyd Webber, Mackintosh had helped redefine the possibilities of musical theatre. But even for him, turning the Vietnam War into a song and dance stage show would be a difficult balancing act. But he did have one trump card. One of Britain's finest Shakespearean actors was looking for a career change.
I was at Stratford playing Macbeth, and around about the same time I went to see Les Mis in London, the first production. And I was incredibly moved while I was watching it, and moved to tears and big lump in my throat and everything. And I thought, it's exactly the kind of effect I want to have on an audience while I'm doing Macbeth, but I'm beating my head against the wall and suffering terribly doing it. And I looked at the actors on stage and I thought, they don't look as if they're working that hard. So I want to do that.
Mackintosh was also able to draw on a pool of talent well used to staging the new breed of mega musical. John Napier had been designer on Cats, Starlight and Les Miserables. But even he was taken aback by the challenges of staging Miss Saigon.
At the first meeting we had, John came to me and said, what I'm going to do with a helicopter on stage.
John, what you have to do is make the helicopter.
I said, listen, John, we could have written the 747 taking off from Saigon airport. You just have a helicopter.
And it has to be the most real thing in the show, because it's like, it's very important.
It's your problem, it's not mine. You are the set designer. You have to deal with it.
In the end, Napier's solution was simple but hugely effective.
All it was, basically, was a very lightweight aluminium frame on the back wall of the theatre. There was a motor on the top of it, and on it were some rubber balls and some bungee cord, so that as the motor started to go, the balls extracted further and further out, and we had little tapes on the bungee. So when you looked at it, it's all illusion. I mean, it looked like a real helicopter was landing in the middle of Drury Lane Theatre.
I'd never seen anything like it in the theatre ever, and it was really, really exciting and incredibly moving.
The fuss that caused, I mean, ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it wasn't high-tech particularly, but it did capture the audience's imagination.
The heat is on in Saigon. The girls are hotter than hell.
At its premiere in September 1989, Miss Saigon had the most triumphant opening yet, with the show recouping its £3 million investment in less than 7 months. But when the show transferred to Broadway, questions started being asked about the casting of Jonathan Pryce.
There was a big controversy because we were at the peak of the politically correct movement.
Certain people thought that this was a role that demanded to be played by an Asian actor. And I could see their point up to a point.
You know, it was the right idea but the wrong show, because Miss Saigon, at that point in its history, employed more Asian performers than any other show in the whole history of Broadway.
I'd come from the Royal Shakespeare Company, which was fostering then blind casting, so there were people of any race could play any role, and we had black actors in Macbeth playing what would be traditionally white British roles. So that's where my head was at the time. It wasn't anything new to me that I should play someone of a different race.
Matters came to a head with a showdown meeting between Cameron Mackintosh and the American Actors Union.
We had the biggest advance at that point in history of $35 million, which was an astronomical amount. And the head of American Equity, who was a famous actress, she said, "Why do you care who plays this role when you've got that amount of money?" And I got so incensed, I told them all to bugger off. And I closed the show.
His ultimate argument was that if I didn't do it, then he would cancel the show. And that's what happened. I mean, that was his threat, and they backed down.
It wasn't a bluff. I really was so angry that American Equity would go, "Why do you care who plays this role?" when I was trying to do a piece of art. So it was all a great furore.
It's time we all entertain my American dream.
With Broadway facing a loss of revenue of over $100 million a year, American Equity was forced to back down. Miss Saigon opened in April '91 to become a commercial and critical hit. But unknown to everybody involved, it proved to be a watershed. The last of the great British mega-musicals to open in the West End or on Broadway.
Everybody thought it could not stop. You had to remind people that these kind of successes are unbelievable flukes. I mean, no shows have ever run this length of time. And, you know, people are always expecting that to carry on.
There's no other way, there's no other way. All that you can do is what's there.
By the early 90s, Britain was in its longest recession for 60 years. To attract an increasingly cash-strapped audience, producers would need to find new ways to entice them in. With Aspects of Love failing to live up to the success of Phantom or Cats, when he revived an earlier musical, Andrew Lloyd Webber embraced a more commercial formula, the world of celebrity.
Producers love bums on seats. The maths is very simple. People fell in love with Scott Robinson. People fell in love with Jason Donovan's pop career. Why wouldn't they fall in love with wanting to come and see a show that represented all those things and more?
May I return